Здравейте! Приветствам ви с присъединяването към семинара тази вечер, организиран от издателска къща Кибея и Джон Кабат-Зин. Поводът е публикуването на 4-те му книги. Медитацията не е това, което мислите, пробуждане без усилие, целебната сила на осъзнатостта и осъзнатост за всички. Радвам се, че мога да представя нашия лектор, автор. Джон Кабат-Зин е доктор по молекулярна биология, почетен професор по медицина. Изучавал е дзен будизъм при Филип Капло, Суенг Сан, Тик Нят Хан, на когото издателство Кибея публикува няколко книги още преди години. И тук искам само да вметна, че преди години, когато публикувахме Тик Нят Хан, нямаше установена терминология за литературата дзен будизъм. И макар, че сега mindfulness навлезе в български език с английското звучене, тогава, благодарение на нашия дългогодишен редактор Иванка Николова, която се свърза с преподавателите в Института по източни езици и култури, преведохме думичката mindfulness като осъзнатост. И така се стараем да я налагаме и в българския език. Осъзнатостта е в основата на дзен будизма и Джон всъщност интегрира учението към научните постижения. Той създава програмата за намаляване на стреса чрез осъзнатост. Всъщност за него ние публикувахме и на страницата ни, и на вас изпратихме в поканата си информация, но искам да акцентирам на един щрих, който смятам, че е много ярък и се оцени от всички вас, а отгоре на всичко няма и откъде да го научите. И това е, че макар Кибея да е правила и преди семинари, срещи, уъркшопи, които са безплатни, но това е първият ни автор, който постави изрично условие, че събитието ще се състои само ако е безплатно. За което, Джон, ти благодарим от сърце, вярвам всички ние. И съм сигурна, че тук участниците ще опровергаем максимата, че ако нещо не е платено, то не се цени. По-скоро след този семинар ще продължим да работим с практиките, които сега Джон ще ни предаде. Ще си помагаме с книгите, които сме публикували. И ще продължим нататък в живота си с осъзнати крачки във всеки един момент, с всеки наш дъх. Отново да благодарим на Джон, че сме заедно на този уъркшоп. В същото време да съобща, че превода се извършва от Петя Савова и Гаяне Минесян. Гаяне е преводачът на книгите на Джон. Те ще правят превода от английски на български, както и от български на английски, когато имате да задавате въпроси. Да, тук ми подсказват, че въпросите трябва да бъдат писменно изпратени към нас. Мога да обявя семинара за открит. Джон, welcome.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here. I want to right away acknowledge the translators that are doing, a lot of work to make it possible for me to speak to you. And for you to ask me questions, given that I have to confess, I don't know any Bulgarian whatsoever. And I've never been to Bulgaria, much as I would very much like to go. And I have to confess, just absolute ignorance of your society and your culture, although I hear that Sofia is a very beautiful city. So I'm very happy to be able to spend this time with you. And I guess before we get started, I'd like to just ask whether it's possible to have a gallery view where I can actually see the 45 people who are on this call at the moment. Is that possible? Or are you not in that kind of a Zoom room where we can do that? Because when I click on the gallery view, all I get is the four of us. But if there are 42 people on, I'd like to be able to actually give my remarks to those 42 people to feel more closely connected with you, if it's possible. I know usually that's what we do on Zoom. This particular version, okay. I'm sorry too, because this is one of the most powerful things about the Zoom platform is that we can actually see each other. And so now I will just have to imagine your faces and your homes instead of seeing you in your homes. And there are very real reasons why I care about this. And it has to do with the whole subject of mindfulness, that mindfulness, as you heard, is a classical meditation, a form of meditation. And it's at least 2,600 years old in the Buddhist tradition. And the Buddhist tradition, as you've learned, if you know anything about Thich Nhat Hanh or any other Zen teachers, the Buddhist tradition often speaks of mindfulness as the heart of Buddhist meditation. And it really has to do with awareness. So that means that you don't have to be a Buddhist to be aware. It's a signature feature of our humanity is that we are capable of awareness. And we don't know much about it, even from a scientific point of view. No neuroscientist can really explain how we go from trillions of neuronal connections in the brain to this remarkable feature of awareness that seems to kind of be something immaterial that arises out of, neurons and synaptic transmissions and so forth. So no one knows how that happens, but it's a profound element of human intelligence and remarkable. So mindfulness has to do with awareness, and we cultivate access to awareness by how we pay attention. So if we're continually distracted, for instance, by our devices, and more people are walking around like this and texting and everything else, very often we are so distracted that we're never actually present. And so now, of course, mindfulness has been around a lot longer than smartphones. But the fact is that we are getting more and more distracted in the 21st century, and in some sense losing our capacity to dive deep into awareness and use it as a kind of superpower, as a form of profound intelligence that very often we don't have available to us because we're not paying attention. So that's why I want to see you on the screen. This mindfulness cultivates a certain kind of intimacy with the present moment. And this intimacy is at the absolute core of meditation. When we take our seat in some kind of formal way and maybe close your eyes, although that's not necessary, but to take your seat, cross-legged on the floor or in a chair, as I am now, and we drop into experience, what we're actually doing is cultivating intimacy with the only moment we are ever alive in. The only moment we ever have a chance to learn or to grow or to express love or other emotions, to touch the heart of another, to not lose our minds under stress when we most need to actually be able to respond effectively. But often when the stress levels get too high, we go crazy. We lose our minds just when we need them the most. And that was true before the global pandemic of COVID-19. Now it's even more true. And although I don't know what it's like in Bulgaria at this point in time with you're dealing with the virus, I saw that some of you were wearing masks before it started. This has actually made life a lot more difficult for people. And mindfulness much more valuable than even before, because when we have to contain our activity in a particular way, or stay home for stretches of time just to protect ourselves from the virus or to protect other people from the virus, that's a lot like being on a meditation retreat. But if you haven't, and just to say, I mean, the people in Sydney, Australia, just came out of a 111-day, very strict lockdown. So that's more than 3 months of being confined to your house. And you have to have a police permission to go more than a mile away from your home. So it was very strict conditions. This is very helpful if you understand mindfulness and have had the experience of being on a meditation retreat. Because on a meditation retreat, we voluntarily lock ourselves down and simplify our lives so that we can actually connect with, and if you can translate this, befriend our own experience of being alive, which only unfolds in this one moment. And yet most of the time we're lost in the past or obsessed about the future and really out of balance because of our thinking and our emotional reactivity, always wanting things to be better than how they are now, or reminiscing about the past because it was so much better then, or blaming somebody from the past for why I'm a mess now, and missing the one Archimedes fulcrum that we might have for applying leverage to actually live life fully. So these 4 books that Kebia has just published, they are a kind of collection of supports for cultivating mindfulness in your own life. And these 4 books are based on a desire to explain to a very wide audience what mindfulness is all about, how medicine and meditation have become so deeply linked that now mainstream medicine recognizes that meditation is one of the most powerful things that doctors can offer to their patients in many, many different kinds of circumstances. And that the mindful yoga that we do within MBSR, that is also an intimate part of the meditation practice, because the body is such an important part of what we need to pay attention to and be aware of and learn to understand the language of, to optimize well-being at the level of the body, the mind, the heart, the spirit, whatever you want to call it, so that we can live life in as healthy and as kind of balanced a way as possible across the lifespan, from when we're very young to when we're very old. And this is possible, and you can't do it by utilizing drugs and surgery. Something goes wrong with you, but you can very much do it if you use meditation, and particularly mindfulness-based stress reduction, as an adjunct or a complement to whatever your doctors and surgeons and medical specialists are able to do for you to help you be maximally healthy. But much of our health is actually affected by how stressed we are and how much pain we are in, and not just physical pain from injury, but also emotional pain from kind of internal injury that's not so easily healed, although that's the role of psychotherapy and of psychology more generally, is to help us integrate across all the different systems that make us human and drop into what you might call the full dimensionality of what it means to be human. And the health is, in some sense, an integral part of that. And the health of a baby is different from the health of a 20-year-old. Of course, the health of a woman is different from the health of a man. There are lots of different kinds of biological concerns that are different across gender, but at the same time, the health of a 20-year-old is not the same as the health of a 50-year-old or the 70-year-old or a 90-year-old. That we need to, in every phase of our lives, listen very, very deeply to what our lives and our bodies and our minds and our hearts are asking of us. And that's what the meditation practice is all about. So before we go any further in this, and I'll explain what the 4 books are, maybe it would be interesting for you to actually have a little bit of a taste of it. And it's very important that you understand that there's nothing special about meditation, okay? So that you don't want to make it into a big deal and then build a big story about how now you're going to be a meditator, okay? And now you're going to try to get to whatever those special meditative states are that you may have heard about, like, you know, that meditation comes with all sorts of promises. All of that is really second order stuff, and it's better not to get caught up in it, especially the word enlightenment. If you want something out of the meditation practice other than who you really, really are, you're making a big mistake, because the more you try to get someplace else, the further you are from who you really are. And the more you feel like you need something else, that you need to attain some special state or some special condition or some deep insight before you can be you. And that's nonsense, but it can actually prevent you from understanding what meditation really is about. And you can spend years meditating and not really benefiting from it in terms of either kindness and compassion towards yourself, or wisdom, embodied wisdom. So that's one of the beauties of this practice, is that every moment is a new beginning. And every in-breath, of course, is a new beginning. Every out-breath is a complete letting go. And the more we get in touch with the unfolding of life in this timeless moment we call now, the more access we have to awareness. And that awareness can allow us to steer through the ups and downs of life, and the stress and the pain and the anguish and the hurt and the fear and the love, in such a way that we find our minds and our hearts and learn how to inhabit in those spaces, as opposed to lose our minds and our hearts and then get angry and bitter and cut off. And of course, all those psychological states can be very unhealthy, and they can actually compound disease. The other thing I'll say is that MBSR probably since medicine and meditation are so deeply linked, even in the words medicine, meditation, you can hear that there's some kind of deep unifying factor there. I won't go into it in detail, but it is explained in book 1 of the series. But the fact is that we can heal ourselves through this practice as a complement to whatever our health conditions are that need to be taken care of by medicine and by healthcare and by doctors. So then we become participants in our own life trajectory towards greater and greater levels of health. Without that, it's just kind of, unfortunately, kind of like it's an auto mechanics model of healthcare and medicine. So you drive your car, you don't pay any attention to it. When it breaks down, you drive it into a garage and they replace whatever it is. That's a very, very bad way to think about the body. Now, in 1979, when I started MBSR, there was almost no science of meditation to speak of. And there are 3 key areas of science that were completely undeveloped. First of all, we did not know about the whole domain of the brain called neuroplasticity, that the brain is an organ that is continually changing its shape and connectivity on the basis of human experience, what happens to us. So if we are faced with a lot of trauma, that can have very deleterious effects on the way the different regions of the brain talk with each other. And that can create an enormous barrier towards healing. On the other hand, if you practice meditation now, there's a whole science of neuroplasticity that shows that just taking your seat and dropping into the present moment and learning how to inhabit the present moment. So from the outside, if I sit like this for a moment or two and you watch me, you would all say that I'm not doing anything. And you'd be right. But that doesn't mean that nothing's happening. In fact, there's an awful lot happening because I am paying attention inwardly. And that paying attention in English, we would call non-doing, not doing anything, but non-doing. It's kind of like a little more like the Chinese, you know, that it's non-doing is really letting ourselves drop into the domain of being, that we're just here. We're falling awake, which is actually the title of the second book in English, Falling Awake. And we're learning how to fall, not asleep, but awake. Because if we zone along on autopilot for most of our life, we could wind up getting old. And then just when we die, have the thought that, oh my God, we have a realization that we were so caught up in what we thought was important that we missed what was really important, and then we died. Goodbye. So it's very powerful to actually tune into the moments that you have and see clearly what they have to offer, because we're so easily distracted, as I was saying, that we can lose ourselves and lose contact with the body, with the mind, and what we most love and most cherish, and then only realize it in our old age or on our deathbed. So you don't want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. This is it. We should wake up, okay? And we can exercise that muscle and learn how to fall awake in any and every moment. So the first book so let me just finish something with the science. So there's this whole field of neuroplasticity that did not exist in 1979. And where now there are some like really huge lines of evidence that this practice of non-doing, of meditation, can actually change the brain, reshape it in ways that are very healthy. Then there's also a new science called epigenetics, which is that we now know that what you do, how much sleep you get, how much exercise you get, what you put in your body in the form of food and so forth, your social relations, almost everything we do has effects on our gene expression in our genome. Our chromosomes, in some sense, are kind of listening to what we do moment by moment, and they are synthesizing proteins or tuning down on the synthesis of proteins by the thousands. And these proteins or enzymes are active in every aspect of our physical well-being, including especially inflammation, which seems to be at the root of most chronic diseases. And there are hundreds of genes that are involved in inflammatory processes in the body that can be regulated in various ways by eating an anti-inflammatory diet, by getting enough sleep, by having positive emotional relationships and relationships of intimacy, and also intimacy with oneself by meditating on a regular basis. So there's a lot of epigenetic evidence that just taking your seat in this kind of a way can actually influence the upregulation, it's called, and the downregulation of hundreds of genes that are involved in cancer, in inflammatory responses, all sorts of things like that. So again, that's another whole domain of scientific evidence that didn't exist in 1979. And the third one is the area of aging, cell aging. It turns out, and Elizabeth Blackburn at the University of California, San Francisco won the Nobel Prize for this work in 2009, I believe. It turns out that at the ends of all of our chromosomes are these repeat subunits of DNA called telomeres, and they are necessary for cell division. You probably learned this when you were studying mitosis in high school biology. But it turns out that every time a cell divides, those repeat subunits of DNA, those telomeres, get shorter. And when they are gone, the cell can no longer divide, and then that's called cell senescence or cell death. So this seems to have something to do with aging, the aging of the body. And stress, Liz Blackburn showed, accelerates the degrading, the shortening of the telomeres enormously. And her colleague, Elizabeth Epple, collaborating with Liz Blackburn, again at UCSF, has shown that meditative practices, and in particular mindfulness, can actually lengthen those telomeres so that you're literally giving yourself more life, longer life at the cellular level. So these three lines of evidence from the science that did not exist in 1979 are now supporting some of the enormous growth that's going on in the field of mindfulness research and its clinical applications. And then it's spreading out into applications in education, in family life. Mindful parenting is a very powerful practice. It's being taught in the schools, not just in the United States, but in many different countries. But in particular, more and more teachers are bringing it into their classes, whether it's younger children or high school children, and then universities are also teaching it, because attention and awareness lie at the absolute heart of whether our lives have meaning, really. So the first book, to come down to the structure of the books, the first book, which is called Meditation is Not What You Think, that's about the whole landscape that I've been talking about, that argues that meditation, both in the form of formal sitting and different kinds of formal meditation practices, And you can practice it sitting, running, walking, moving, and also lying down. So it's very versatile. These formal practices are not the real meditation. The real meditation is how you live your life from moment to moment to moment. So life is the meditation practice. That's what it's the absolute heart of Zen. If you've heard about Zen, if you follow Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings, it's all about this moment, not this moment meditating like a statue in the British Museum or in some temple in China or Japan. It's about this moment, no matter where you find yourself. Now, I think there's another book of mine that was published in Bulgarian a long time ago called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And it's important to remember that that's true, that wherever you go, whatever you do, you're right there. So you have more degrees of freedom in how to be in relationship with your life than we usually are aware of. And those degrees of freedom can make all the difference between health and illness and between happiness and unhappiness. So that means you're in charge. You're at the steering wheel. You can sort of go with the flow of your own life in ways that optimize well-being and minimize harm to yourself and to other people, because very often when we are not happy, we get angry. And when we get angry, very often the people who suffer the most are the people who are closest to us. Is that not true? The people we love the most often are the people we scare the most or harm the most or abuse the most. Why? Because the mind is not happy and it gets violent, it gets, depressed, it gets angry. And this is something that we can learn to exercise. We can actually exercise and regulate the muscle of mindfulness so that we don't lose our minds, or we quickly regain our minds when we do lose them at various times. And so family life becomes the best monastery of all for training in mindfulness, because our buttons will be pushed constantly by our children or our spouse or partner or our parents or whatever. The family is the perfect environment for watching how easily you can lose your mind, and also what's on your mind and how easily you can misinterpret what other people are doing because you want a particular outcome. We can even say you're attached to a particular outcome. And if you don't get it, then you're not happy. And then you let people know you're not happy. The opposite of that would be what we could call equanimity, a kind of balance of mind that sees what's going on in your own mind, that I want this, but I'm not getting what I want and I'm not happy. And then you can realize you don't have to let that dominate your moment or your life. You can actually go with the flow and not take things that you want to make so personally, not take them personally, because fundamentally they're not. And the mind that wants to take them personally is a little bit crazy, a little bit deranged. And that's true for all of us. It's normal. So it's not like, the kind of craziness that would wind you up in a mental hospital, but still it's very unhealthy. Very unhealthy. So then meditation becomes like a skill that you can actually acquire by practice over and over and over again. So book 1 describes the kind of what meditation is and isn't and contextualizes it. Book 2, which in English is called Falling Awake, is the actual practice itself. So I give you a lot of different doors into this same room that I'm talking about. There's lying down meditation, or what we call a body scan. So in the hospital, when we have people come into the hospital, they have every conceivable medical condition you can imagine. And you know what we ask them to do? We usually have a big, beautiful room in the hospital. and with a nice carpet. And then we have mats of various kinds, colorful mats. We ask people to lie down on the floor in the hospital. Nobody ever lies down on the floor in the hospital. But we invite these medical patients with every condition you can imagine to actually lie down on the floor on these mats. And we help them down if they need help getting down. And if they can't, then of course they sit. And we do a lying down meditation called the body scan. And it's a way of actually reconnecting with your body. But you know, when people lie down, since we're all sleep deprived, the first thing that happens is that even though this is about falling awake, the first thing that happens, of course, is you'll fall asleep. And that's okay too, because you need sleep. So we need to get as much sleep as possible and then learn how to fall awake at some other time. So I will often tell people, well, if you fall asleep during the body scan, that's fine. Just pick another time of day that you use it during the MBSR to fall awake. Because the homework in MBSR is that you have to practice at least 45 minutes a day, 6 days a week, with these audio programs of guided meditations that are outlined in, on a lot of different websites and books and so forth. So it's a major lifestyle change to decide to take MBSR, because it means for 8 weeks you have to carve out about an hour a day to practice non-doing using audio, programs for guidance. And then, of course, you have to go to the hospital once a week for a 2.5-hour class with about 30 or 40 other medical patients. And then you get to hear what other people with other kind of medical conditions have. And that's really quite remarkable, because usually we're so self-focused that we don't think about how many things are right with the body. And when you hear what goes wrong with other people's bodies, a lot of people then feel like, okay, I can accept what's going on with me, what's wrong with me. And then the key principle is that we say this to everybody who comes in, no matter what their conditions, cancer, heart disease, chronic pain, HIV, AIDS, whatever it is, COVID. We say, listen, as long as you're breathing, from our point of view, there's more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what's wrong with you. And what we're going to do during these 8 weeks is pour energy in the form of attention and this meditative awareness into what's right with you. Let the whole rest of healthcare and the hospital and the medical team take care of what's wrong and see what happens. And I can tell you that what happens is that maybe 85% of the people who come, who have had chronic conditions for not just years, but decades often, on the average, find out that something about their health and well-being improves. Their symptoms drop, both physical and psychological, but they also feel healthier and more appreciative of what their body can do, and more appreciative of their relationships, both in the family and elsewhere. And a lot of people will say, well, you know what? This MBSR program gave me back my life. They'll often say that to me or to their instructor. And I'll often be very moved by that, but I have to say, and I usually do, I really appreciate that you say that, but we didn't give you back your life. This program did not give you back your life. You gave your life back to yourself through the meditation practice, through the exercising of this muscle of mindfulness, the cultivation of it over days, weeks, and months. It's a 2-month program, the MBSR, but again, people don't stop. You do it for years, decades even. I've been doing it myself personally. I've been practicing for over 55 years. But it's not really correct to call it a doing, because remember, I said it was about a non-doing. So it's really a being. And I don't know how you'll translate that in Bulgarian, but mindfulness really forces us to find new ways to use language to understand things that very often we only understand conceptually, but don't understand in a deeper way in terms of awareness. And thinking and awareness are two very, very different forms of intelligence. And all this I go into in the various books, okay? So that you'll understand the universe of mindfulness and then the actual formal and informal meditation practices, and also the poetry of mindfulness. Because ultimately, when you are fully present in your life, it's not just that it improves your health or lengthens your telomeres or reduces your, sort of particular kinds of risk factors for chronic disease, but it actually gives you just what they were saying, a sense that I've been given my life back, that I'm actually feel integrated in my life and the possibilities that it offers me, that it's workable if I'm willing to do a certain amount of work. Even the stress and the pain and the difficulties, that they are workable, not by trying to fix anything. Meditation is not about fixing, it's about healing. And just to say, and you'll see it in the book, book 2 and book 3, my working definition of healing is that it's not fixing. It's not making it all better or going in and surgically changing everything, repairing. It's about coming to terms with things as they are. Coming to terms with things as they are. So you can come to terms with things as they are in the midst of terrible pain, illness, when you're very old, when you're very young, when you're facing death. There's no moment that we're alive and conscious that we can't actually come to terms with the actuality of things, and better to do it while you're alive. So this moment is really it. It's a phenomenal opportunity. And then the cultivation of mindfulness becomes a love affair with what's deepest and best in life. And in the unique way that you are a flower on the face of the earth. And so it's life in the form of you, not in the form of some kind of abstraction or generalized human being. No, you, yourself. And here comes some of the challenges of that, is that when we say, I have a body, for instance, or I am breathing, we don't know who's talking. If we say, I am breathing, but I breathe when I'm asleep, okay? Just the way you do. I breathe when I forget to breathe. I'm still breathing. So to say that I'm breathing is not really fair. It's a function of the brainstem and the phrenic nerve and the diaphragm that keeps me and you breathing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But we say, I'm breathing. We also say, I have a body. But who is it that has a body? We don't say, I'm pretty sure you don't say in Bulgarian, I am a body. But we don't know who the I is. This is really important because we build stories or narratives about who I am. And what I want to say, and you'll see it if you read the books and begin to practice, you'll experience it, that we are so much bigger than our narratives that we need to, in some sense, wake up to the fact that our narratives can keep us imprisoned in unhappiness and delusion, and very often in resentment and anger, because we're not living the life that we thought was possible for us. And the only person that can give your life back to you, it's not me, it's not MBSR, if you have an MBSR teacher, it's you. Thich Nhat Hanh can't do it, whoever your favorite meditation teachers are, they cannot do that for you. They're all saying the same thing. You have to do the work yourself. And the work is non-doing. So I know it sounds a little crazy, but it's pointing to something that's not just not crazy, but it's the core of true human sanity. And it becomes more and more important the more stressful the world becomes. And let me tell you, at least in the country that I'm in, less than a week away from our presidential election, it couldn't be more stressful and crazy. And the stakes for the world, not even talking about global warming at this point, are enormous. So we need to wake up on a lot of different levels. That's the fourth book, is about waking up, not just as an individual person or a medical patient, but as a world, as a society, before our cleverness winds up doing us in as a species, before the sea levels rise to the point where, you know, even the Black Sea is like, 40 feet higher or something like that. That's not going to be good for anybody who's living in that area. And it would be billions of people around the world if sea levels rise. And if you look at photographs of what's happening to the glaciers, what's happening to the North Polar ice cap, and what's happening to the Antarctic ice, you'll see that over the past 50 years, it's like disappearing at rates that the geologists know or the climatologists know have not happened in millions and millions of years. And it's human caused. And so we need to wake up as a society, not just as individual people, as a global planetary species, which is actually what the name Homo sapiens sapiens means. It's the species that is aware and is aware that it's aware. So we need to learn how to live our way into it. So that's the fourth book. I'll come back to that. The third book is about the first part of the third book, which is the larger part. There are two parts in each book. The first part is the evidence for the scientific evidence for the effect of this meditation practice on the body, the mind, and our social relationships. So as I was saying, a huge amount of new science has developed in the past 40 or 50 years that allows us to actually study meditation using fMRI brain scanners and so forth. Excuse me, all sorts of different technologies that let us look at all these new areas in the body that we were unable to understand before, and to see that they change through this practice of non-doing. Now, I'll say one more thing about the non-doing, and that's in the second part of this book, book 3, that non-doing doesn't mean doing nothing. It means letting your doing, when you do act in the world, when you express emotion, when you take care of other people, when you do work, you let the quality of that doing come out of your being. And when you do, and when you've cultivated access to this domain of being, it's an entirely different doing that comes out of it. Much, much more useful, much, much more satisfying, and much, much more healing for the world. Whether the world is your body, whether the world is your family, whether the world is your work setting, or whether the world is Bulgaria in your case, or the entirety of the planet. And what we do as small individual people makes a difference. We might think, well, who am I? I'm just one small individual person. What difference can I make in the world? You can make a huge amount of difference. Even if seems like it's a tiny difference, that kind of tiny difference is huge. Just the way the world, just your body needs all of the trillions of cells that make up the human body. And those cells can't go to war with each other. Like, say, the heart cells don't like the way the liver cells work and they want to go to war with each other. How long do you think the body would last if your bones went to war with your liver, and your liver went to war with your heart, and your heart went to war with your lungs, and everybody was struggling because I'm the most important organ, or I'm the most important cell type You know, I don't like the way you look, you liver cells. You're not the right color, or you bone cells, you know, we're the only good cells, or you heart cells. It's insanity. But if you think that we ourselves are the cells of the one body politic of the planet, then every one of us counts. And so even tiny little ways in which you shift in the direction of healing, well-being, wisdom, compassion, ethical foundation of non-harming, as in the Hippocratic Oath in medicine, that has huge repercussions in the world. So the second part of the third book, to just reach it for a second, I tell a lot of stories about my own personal life and how the meditation practice has unfolded for me and decisions that I've made. And the reason I did that, it's fairly unusual to do this kind of thing, but I wanted to really make the practice real. You know, and we all pretend that like we don't have a personal life, we've just transcended the details of mundane world. But of course, that's not true at all. So as I mentioned before, being a parent, for instance, hugely stressful, even though it's a wonderful experience, but it's hugely stressful. I mean, it's almost axiomatically obvious that it would benefit parents and children to be a little bit more equanimous, a little bit clearer, a little bit more compassionate, a little bit aware of how our anger can harm rather than help, and then learn how to self-regulate in that regard. And that's true for work settings. Some people are really problematic in the workplace and wind up getting fired because nobody can stand to be with them. But very often that's something that they could have some degree of control over if only they would pay attention. I talk about death. There are 2 chapters on death. And, you know, in yoga, the corpse pose, lying down meditation is called the corpse pose. It's done in, you're lying on your back, and it's called the corpse pose because the invitation is to actually die, at least metaphorically. You die to the future, die to the past, and therefore wake up into your life in the present moment. So you can meditate in bed in the corpse pose. You don't even have to get out of bed and sit on the cushion. And just when you say you wake up in the morning, check and see if that's true. Because maybe you're just already jumping out of bed on autopilot because you're late for work. What about actually lying in bed on your back in the corpse pose and let yourself die to the future, die to the past, wake up to this moment. And before you get out of bed, make sure that you finish the job of waking up. Then you go into the bathroom and you can brush your teeth mindfully, or hug your children mindfully, or wake them up mindfully. So there's no part of life that's not part of practice. And what I've tried to do in certain parts of the second part of book 3, in certain chapters, is to actually share some of my own personal experience without making it personal, as a way of inspiring you, the reader, to actually figure out how you want to be in relationship with your ordinary moments unfolding. And then the 4th book is about mindfulness in the world. It's called Mindfulness for All, but the subtitle of it is The Wisdom to Transform the World. And that's because we are cells of the one body politic on the planet. When I was young, there were less than 4 billion people on the planet. Now there are close to 8 billion people on the planet. And, you know, we're using up the water, the fresh water. We're using up all sorts of resources, and we're doing that very unequally. So some people have everything and other people have virtually nothing. So we're seeing all these migrations of huge numbers of people. There have always been migrations on planet Earth, all of human life came out of Africa and migrated to everywhere, including Bulgaria, to Australia, to China. It all came out of Africa. And so the fourth book argues that by taking care of ourselves, we're also responsible for taking care of the world. And when we do that in a way that embodies joy and happiness and wisdom and compassion, that the world is going to benefit in ways both little and big. And then the last section of book 4 has to do with the fact that I not only was trained as a scientist at MIT in the laboratory of a world famous Nobel Prize winner named Salvador Luria, who was actually the thesis advisor of Jim Watson, who won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the double helical structure of DNA, along with Francis Crick. I talk about my own love for what science has shown us about the world. What Einstein understood about gravity, for instance, and the mystery of the universe, the black holes at the center of each galaxy, all sorts of things that are not known. And then the mystery of the biology of your cells and the magnificent architecture all the way down to the atomic level and the molecular level in your cells, every single one of your cells. It's like a whole universe. And then to come back to who you are or who's breathing, you can look everywhere in any one of your cells, in any one of the structures within the cells, and you will never find you in there. This is a kind of like a universe, like the Andromeda Galaxy or the Milky Way. And then all of a sudden you get sentience, you get awareness coming out of these billions and billions of cells and trillions of synaptic connections. And then there's an awareness that is self-aware. So that's you. And what I was saying is, and we go into it in some detail in the book, the poetry of not knowing who we are. So that awareness is knowing in a non-conceptual way, but it's also knowing what we don't know. And that's where all creativity really comes from, all imagination really comes from, this capacity that we have to not know and then to want to find out and to manifest our own realizations or understanding in ways that have this signature creativity. And often it comes out of non-doing. Our most creative moments are when we get out of our own way. And meditation can be hugely helpful in that regard. So in a certain way, what I want to convey is that it's like the poetry of this kind of meditation practice is profound because it illuminates beauty, deep connectivity, mystery, the marvel of the natural universe, which includes you and the environment in every conceivable way. So that's the fourth of these 4 books. So now, before we have Q&A, go into questions, I'd like to have a brief period, if you're up for it, where we actually drop in, where we actually cultivate mindfulness in a kind of formal way. Although I've already said that the real meditation practice is life itself. So it's like 24/7. But it's very helpful to have enough discipline to exercise the muscle, go to the gym of your own mind and body day by day, and have some time for non-doing where you just drop in. So let me, if you're still with us, invite you to sit in a posture, if you're sitting, sit in a posture that embodies wakefulness and dignity for you. And I know you've just had a time change and it's all confused with, well, you know, what time it even is. But if you check your watch, I'll tell you what time it is in Sofia or anywhere in Bulgaria. It's now. It's now. It's not 7:30 or, you know, whatever time it is there now that you've moved the clocks forward. I mean, backward. It's now. So can we actually sit in a posture that embodies whatever it was that brought you to spend an hour already with me online? Something brought you here. You all have better things to do, including maybe eat dinner or be with the family or whatever it is at the end of a long workday. But you chose to be here. That's meaningful. That's profoundly meaningful. And not only that, but I'm noticing that the number of participants has hardly fallen off at all, which means that I've been talking for more than an hour and you haven't disappeared. There's a reason for that. Maybe this is not me speaking to you anywhere near as it is you speaking to yourself, or maybe not speaking, your heart listening to itself. And if that's the case, let me just say that is really trustworthy, really, really, really trustworthy. So I'm not here to sell books, although I think my publisher would like me to say that, yeah, I'm here to sell books because, of course, the books are a vehicle. So, of course, if you're attracted to what's being said, you'll find a whole universe in these books. But the real universe is you, and you're already whole. You're already complete as you are. And what this is being offered for is to support you in that realization so that it can, in some sense, to use neuroscience language, become your default mode, that you live more mindfully than mindlessly, that you live more in responding to stress than reacting to stress. And that's a practice. It's a way of being. So let's establish ourselves, as I said, in a posture that embodies wakefulness, dignity, and the love that I'm just guessing that it's love or deep interest of some kind, the love that brought you here in the first place. All of you who are here online at this moment. And if you care to, you can close your eyes, although it's not necessary. You can gaze at the screen. And become aware of the fact that there's breath moving in and out of the body. And that there's no you doing the breathing. The body, we might say, is breathing itself. And we can pay attention to it. And we almost never do unless we're choking on food or we have a very bad cold or we have a chronic lung condition. But let's cultivate intimacy with the feeling of this breath, with the sensations associated with this breath coming into the body and this breath leaving the body. And seeing if you can place your attention on the sensations, whether they're in your belly or at the nostrils or in the chest, wherever the breath sensations are most vivid for you. And actually ride on the waves of the in-breath and the out-breath, or surf on the wave of this breath coming in and this breath leaving the body. And just see if you can ride on these waves of the breath, moment by moment, by moment, by moment, and breath by breath, by breath. So we're giving the mind something to do. We're giving it a focus of attention. We're focusing our attention. And what we focus on is technically called the object of our attention. So the breath sensations in the belly or in the body, wherever they are, that becomes our, for now, chosen focus of attention or object of attention. But let me just say from the very beginning, especially if you're brand new to meditation practice, that it's not about the object of meditation. It's not about the breath or any other object that you might be attending to. It's about the attending itself. It's about the awareness that arises through paying attention, moment by timeless moment. And so riding on this breath coming in, riding with full awareness on this breath leaving the body. And letting your awareness be, if you will, a place that you can take up residence, like your apartment or your home. You can be at home in awareness of the body, breathing. And then you see wherever you go, you can be at home because you can't leave home without the body. Unless you forget. And then, of course, you can be disembodied. Many of us are a lot during the day, where we're just stuck in our heads. In English, we say out to lunch. But even when that happens, you can always come back. Back to this moment, back to the body, back to this breath, coming in or going out. And since you're breathing 24/7, the breath is available to us as an object throughout the day, throughout the night. So even if you can't get to sleep in the middle of the night, very, very powerful to ride on the waves of your own breathing and not be attached, either sleeping or falling awake, but to just be present. And if you need to fall asleep, you'll fall asleep. And if for some reason the energy is such that you won't fall asleep, you'll benefit enormously from resting in awareness in this way. And cultivating that intimacy that we started out talking about. That intimacy with the life that's yours to live. If you aren't stuck in your story of me, which might be partly true, but is never true enough. And also, the real you is so much bigger than your story, and has been from the moment of your first breath, when you're a baby. And so here we are. There's no place to go. There's no special feeling that we're trying to attain. And there's nothing to do. So you can really rest in your own awareness. You can take up residency here in awareness, and you can explore it too. You can ask whether there's any end to it, whether there's any circumference or periphery to your awareness. And I'll bet you'll find very quickly that no, there isn't. It's boundless. You can, just like the universe, by the way. You can also ask whether there's any center to it. And I think you'll discover, if you really look deeply, pay attention, that there's no center either to your awareness. It doesn't even make sense to think of it that way. So our awareness just is, just like the universe. No center, no periphery, boundless, and unbelievably mysterious. And at the same time, insanely beautiful. Now, one other thing about this meditation practice is that you've probably noticed already, whether you're a beginner or you've been meditating for a long time, that the mind has not, your attention has not stayed on your body breathing, on the breath sensations themselves. I'm willing to bet that your mind has gone here and has gone there, maybe partly because I'm talking so much, doing the guiding, but maybe also because your mind is talking to you all the time anyway. So there's a very important other instruction, and that is when you notice that your mind is not on your breathing, noticing what is on your mind. Where has your mind wandered to when you wake up to it? And then, without judging it as good or bad, and without pushing it away or pursuing it if it's something enticing or attractive, simply let it be and come back to your body sitting here breathing. And you should know that if the mind wanders 100 times in 100 seconds or nanoseconds, every time the instruction is the same. With gentleness and kindness, just noticing what's on your mind. There's nothing wrong with this. It's not like you're bad because your mind wandered. It's in the nature of the mind to wander, just as it's in the nature of the Black Sea to wave. So noticing what's on your mind, and then coming back to your body, sitting here breathing, and once again resting in the awareness that holds even the breath and the body. So your attention is the doorway to awareness, and your awareness can be of anything and everything, not just the breath and the body, but thoughts, emotions, sounds, sensations of all kinds, impulses. And now, if your eyes have been closed, let me invite you to open your eyes slowly and continuing to rest in awareness, so that nothing's different. It's just that now we have stuff coming in through the eyes, and in particular, what's on the screen in front of us, because we're all doing this on Zoom, which is quite amazing in its own right. Without this technology, of course, we would not be able to be in the same room. And interestingly enough, there's the feeling that we're all in the same room. I'm not even in Europe, but here we are, all in the same room. And really, when push comes to shove, we could say it's the room of the human heart in a certain way. Because, there are 47, 48 people on this call, and you're still here. And I really honor that motivation, because, we're all busy and we got lots of other things to carry us away or distract us. And here we are. So, I have these bells here, and sometimes when I end a meditation retreat or begin a meditation retreat, I ring them. Because then we introduce sound, another object of attention, possible object of attention, and we can drink in the hearing. But even though I have rung the bells, let's say I haven't, because often I don't ring the bells at the end. I might ring them just at the beginning to make the point that the real meditation practice, as I've said several times already, the real meditation practice is life itself. So there's no beginning to it, and there's no end to it. And the more you're willing to learn how to follow the glide path of your own attention into awareness, into the body, into sounds, thoughts, emotions, and embrace them like a mother would embrace her child, the more you liberate yourself from this very strong self-identification that often creates enormous suffering. Because while we don't know, as I said earlier, who the I, the me, or the mine is, we're very, very attached to that way of seeing, to those kinds of lenses. And so when things are good for me, then I'm happy. When things are bad for me, I'm not happy. And we're like, like a robot just going up and down depending on external conditions that we can blame for our unhappiness. And what mindfulness can do is liberate you from that, so that you take responsibility for the mystery and the miracle of being alive in this moment, and for the full repertoire of your multiple intelligences. And you live in an embodied way with some degree of equanimity, of balance of mind and heart, because you've been exercising the muscle of mindfulness. So I'll say one more thing and then we'll go into Q&A. When I go like this, you can imagine that maybe I'm holding a weight and I'm exercising the muscle. But as you know, from going to the gym, a lot of the time we think we should like weightlifting, but after a while, we don't want to do it again because it hurts, because the muscle gets tired. So let me just make the connection to meditation. We're following our breath, and the breath goes out and the breath comes in, and the breath goes out and the breath comes in and the breath goes out. And then all of a sudden we don't want to follow the breath anymore. The mind goes off someplace else. We bring it back. We just stay with this. Now, sometimes the mind won't want to stay with the breath and won't want to come back. We come back anyway. We work with the resistance of the mind, just like we work with the resistance of a weight in your hand. When we exercise the muscle of attention in that way, it gets stronger. It gets more robust. It makes it easier for us to default to wakefulness as rather than default to automatic pilot. And so, again, this is a lifetime's engagement. This is not the work of 8 weeks or 8 minutes or 8 years. This is a love affair with life that, if it truly is a love affair, you wouldn't want it to ever end. And the beauty of it is it's a love affair without the narcissism. It's not about I, me, and mine. It's about us as human beings, and about recognizing that no matter how wonderful our story is, our true nature is much, much bigger than our narratives and our desires, and our likes and dislikes. And they are kind of like prisons for us, as Einstein said, restricting us to our personal desires and to a few people nearest to us. And our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all creatures in their beauty. And this is a liberative practice. It liberates you from greed, hatred, delusion, We don't often want to own them and say, well, my greed, my hatred, and my delusion. But it would be really valuable to recognize that, yeah, it's not yours, but when you're a prisoner of it, it might as well be. So we need to free ourselves from this prison, as Einstein said. And the only time we will ever have to do that work is now.
Благодарим отново на всички, че бяхме заедно. До скоро!
Thank you. Be well. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.